Every aspiring shredder needs to know a handful of pattern-based sequence licks in order to add some spice into their soloing, but the problem is if those patterns become too predictable, your soloing starts to sound more like practice time. On today's episode, I'm going to show you guys a odd 10-note long sequence that'll have you busting out of those predictable sounding patterns in no time. Check it out. Well, hey there kids, and welcome to this week's installment of Weekend Wankshop. Here with your best buddy, Uncle Ben. You know guys, I've been hooked on pattern-based licks ever since the early days of my playing when my good buddy Eric Reason showed me that first Paul Gilbert Intense Rock instructional VHS, in which Paul demonstrates some of his own terrifying shred patterns. The cool thing about a sequence lick is that you learn how to play it once and then you can drop it into whatever scale you need to fit the harmonic framework that you're working within at that time. But the problem is that most sequence licks take place over short patterns that resolve themselves over just one or two beats. So after you've heard one of these pattern-based licks go through even just a few repetitions, your brain starts to kind of figure out exactly where it's going and it becomes very predictable. Let's take for example the typical sixes lick that you see in 3-note per string scales a lot of the times. What this involves is taking all 3 notes that are on a string, like in the C scale, and playing each of them twice before you move on to the next string. That's a really classic, easy to play shredder lick, and it's very reliable, but the problem is if you're like most people, after you've heard about 2 beats worth of that and you're hearing that pattern restart on the downbeat every time, it starts to become very, exercisey. You know what I mean? It sounds like, oh, you've been practicing that a lot, because your brain can immediately decode the pattern and figure out what's going on with it. But the cool thing is, if you deliberately make patterns that kind of bleed halfway into another beat instead of just restarting right on the downbeat, your patterns become a lot less predictable sounding. Your ear has a harder time hearing where the pattern is starting and ending if it's not landing directly on the downbeat. The pattern I'm going to show you guys on today's lesson is based around a 10-note long sequence of 16th notes. Now if I was to count that out with the beat, you'd hear that where this pattern starts and ends isn't necessarily on the downbeat. Here's what it sounds like on its own. It's 10 notes. So on. Now if I play that while also counting out the beats, you got to hear that where that pattern ends isn't on a 1. It's like halfway through beat 3. 1E and 2E and 3E. So that means the next part of the sequence starts on and 4E and 5E, and making your patterns deliberately a little bit more disguised like this is an easy way that you can still have easy to play, reliable shred licks, but also sound a lot less predictable to your audience. But as always, before we get into learning the lick, let's hear it again at stepdad speed. And as always, tabs for this lesson are available on my Instagram page at Ben Eller Guitars. Search for hashtag Weekend Wankshop 227. Find the tabs for the lick, learn how to play it, then upload a video of yourself shredding through it along with the hashtag
Weekend Wankshop.
Also, downloadable tabs and the short backing track I made at the first of this video are available to my Patreon supporters. So be sure to go over to patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. Check out the tiers, find the one that suits you best, and drop me some support if you like what you see on the channel.
Thanks a bunch.
Also, forgive me during this lesson because my super old dog Attila is in here sleeping in the room and he is snoring away. So if you hear some random groaning or grumbling, it's not a ghoul in the attic. It's a really old dog in the room. I mean, listen to that thing. This lick is based around the A minor scale, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, in kind of a 4-note per string sort of pattern, but I don't really think of it that way. If you're trying to learn the natural notes across the board, this is a really good one to help you see how they travel laterally across the neck. Okay, so to start with, I'm going to play a 3-note phrase, A, B, C, frets 5, 7, and 8 on the low E string. I'm going to play that 2 times in a row, so that's 6 notes. Okay, so that's 5, 7, 8, 5, 7, 8. So now that you've played 5, 7, 8 twice, Using your little finger, jump up to the next note in the scale, which is a D note here at fret number 10. Now I'm in a new 3-note group, and I'm going to basically phrase it as a 4-note sequence like this. I'm going to play 10, 7, 8, 10. Again, that's 4 notes. 10, 7, 8, 10. That's the entire kind of essence of this 10-note sequence we're talking about today. So we got 5, 7, 8 twice. Jump up to the next note in the scale and play 10, 7, 8, 10. Next what we're going to do is to continue onwards in the scale onto the A string here. And I'm going to play the same idea but using the notes that are on that string. So I'm going to play 7, 8, 10 2 times. Jump up a whole step to the next note in the scale here at 12. And I'm going to play 12, 8, 10, 12. Okay? Next go to the next note in the scale on the D string here, which is fret 9, the B note. Here we're going to play 9, 10, 12 2 times. Jump up to the next note in the scale up here at 14, 10, 12, 14. So now you have 3 strings worth. Next go to the G here, and we're going to play 10, 12, 14 2 times. Jump up to the next note in the scale, the B at 16, and you got to play 16, 12, 14, 16. Then we're going to be on the B string here, going to the next note in the scale, which is here at 13. I'm going to play 13, 15, 17 2 times. Then with your little finger, come up a half step right here to fret number 18. You're going to play 18, 15, 17, 18. So your B string went. And then lastly here on the high E, we're going to play 15, 17, and 19 2 times. Going to come up here to 20, 17, 19, 20. That's the 10-note phrase on the high E. That's it for the entire 10's sequence here. And I'm going to show you a little lick at the end I made to resolve it rhythmically. But so far you should have this. Alright Wankers, now stick with me here for just a second because in order to follow this next part, you're going to need to do a little bit of maths. A little bit of mathemagic is required to make sense of how this whole thing kind of resolves over a typical 4-measure long phrase, okay? I deliberately wrote this lick to take place over 4 measures of music with the last note ending on the downbeat of the next measure in order to show you guys how you can take these long sequence things like 10's and make them resolve rhythmically at the end of a phrase. Okay, so when you're playing 16th notes, 1 E-enda, 2 E-enda, 3 E-enda, 4 E-enda, you're playing 4 notes per beat, right? 1 E-enda, 2 E-enda, 3 E-enda, 4 E-enda. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you could say that each measure of 16th notes contains 16 notes. Okay, so measure number 1 has 16 notes. Measure number 2 has 16 notes. Measure 3 has 16 notes. Measure 4 has 16 notes. That means we've got a total of 64 notes total that we're going to play over the course of this lick to make this line up evenly, right? Now, because this is a 10-note phrase, I got 6 strings on the guitar, right? I can play this 10-note phrase on all of my 6 strings, and that gives me a total of 60 notes. So in other words, if you add up this, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60. Now, at the end of that, that means we have 4 more notes we need to account for before we can end up resolving evenly, rhythmically. So what I had to do is to come up with a little phrase here at the very end of this sequence to make it make sense and flow right and end on a downbeat. So just to put that again in a nutshell, it's a 10-note long sequence. We can play it 6 times over a measure of 4, and that leaves us with the remainder of 4 more notes we need to play. So the last thing that we played on the high E string was this, the 10-note phrase. And then I follow it with this. So this is 19, 17, 19, 20. Okay, that was my remaining 4 notes. So now after I play all that stuff, those extra 4 notes there at the end makes this add up to 64 notes, which means that it fits evenly over 4 measures of 4 over 4. And then to make it resolve on a downbeat, I just ended here on the 17 on the high E, the A note, the root of the scale, and did a little slide off like that. So, I don't know, some of you guys might look at it as the 10-note phrase and then a 5-note ending. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But in my head, I'm still just thinking of it as the 10-note phrase, a 4-note phrase, and then an ending to resolve at the end. So one more time slowly, here's the entire thing. All 6 10-note patterns are ending in our resolve. So at the top of the video, I played this lick at 150 BPM, but I want to play it again with a metronome at about 100 BPM so you guys can really hear where this thing is falling rhythmically. Be sure to pay close attention to the metronome doing the high-pitched beat on beat number 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Also down the barrel like this, be sure to notice the downward pick slanting kind of approach I'm taking right here with my picking hand, where my downstrokes are deep in the strings and my upstrokes are popping out. 2, 3, 4. So there you go, guys. Hopefully that gives you all some cool ideas about how you can mix up your own playing by using some rhythmic phrases that don't resolve so neatly on top of every single beat like a lot of typical 6-note or 4-note or 8-note shred patterns do. Try to make up some of your own phrases based on some of these longer numbers that don't necessarily fit over a single beat, or even try taking the 10-note phrase we did today, only sequence it as triplets instead for a really unusual feel and unpredictable sound. Thanks as always for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to my channel for new lessons coming at you every single week. You all can follow me on Instagram at Ben Eller Guitars or on Facebook at facebook.com/Uncle Ben Eller. And don't forget to support me on Patreon over at patreon.com/Ben Eller Guitars. Also, if you're interested in booking some one-on-one Skype lessons with me, be sure to drop me an email, benellerguitars@gmail.com. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Well guys, that was fun, but it's time to get away from the dang screen, pick up that guitar, and go practice. Less clicking, more picking.